always knew my mother was going to die. And I remember afterward thinking it odd that I knew with such immediate certainty. I mean, we hadn't shared confidence in perhaps forever, but she looked up at me from her sip of tea as I walked through the door that day, and there it was. She started to speak of it, haltingly, as one unused to disclosing personal information. "I'm not entirely sure I understand it," she said, in a tone which meant, "I suspect there's a conspiracy." I could sense all the unspoken worries were about to come forth in that oddly hiccuped way of speaking she was using, so I interrupted to change the rhythm of a discourse that was beginning to exhaust us both. Well, should I speak to your doctor to get better details?
Well, it might be of some use. Be prepared for 2 of them. They always have backup. One to give the bad news and one to write down notes. I mean, not exactly good cop, bad cop, more bad cop, funeral director. I'm to have some sort of treatment that requires a stay in hospital.
All right, I'll call in the morning.
No. You should see her in person so that you can see her face to know if she's competent.
The notion that one's face can determine credibility or competence reminds me of childhood admonitions to stop making faces! Apparently I had been a notorious face maker, which led to my mother's long-held suspicion that I was not a serious person. And by serious I knew her to mean trustworthy. My mother often used to say I was not the sort of person who could be counted on to do the right thing. As an adult, I've made peace with my mother's qualitative assessments of my character, in part because I'm fairly certain the right thing as a concept or practice doesn't exist. Okay, we'll do that.
Remember to scope out the cafeteria. I'm not staying in that hospital if they don't do raisin toast.
I promise to bring you an entire loaf of raisin bread.
Well, what use will that be if it isn't toast?
I helped my mother out of her chair and to the stairs so she could lie down and forget. Oh. And as she made her way up towards the bedroom, one gingerly step at a time, I felt an unfamiliar pang. I understood my mother felt already defeated by the process that lay ahead, and a sudden, intense emotional storm washed through me, passed over me, paralysing me to that spot at the base of the stairs, unable to speak or breathe. My mother turned the corner at the landing without looking back, and quietly shut her bedroom door behind her. That paralytic moment exemplifying a lifetime of inability to reach each other. An inability that neither illness nor death would change. But I so badly wanted to turn around and escape to the security of my tiny little apartment where nothing unexpected could leap out at me and destroy my calibrated existence. Instead, I stayed. And later in the deepest dark of the night, I heard her downstairs, and as I padded down to tell her to go back to bed, I saw her standing in the still dark, pressed up against the winter glass, looking out over the woods. Without even shifting towards me, my mother softly said, "We have to do something about those fallen wings." And we stood there, together, in silence. My mother seeing something I never would. And me, mourning a relationship that never was. In the morning, I made my way to the hospital to see the doctor with the possibly incompetent face. I don't like hospitals. I've never liked them. They smell of disinfectant that can never quite cover up the traces of urine and sadness. And so I waited in my car in the parking lot until I felt ready to face all that walking through those doors entailed. Bloody hell, I whispered. It's my favourite swear word. Well, 2 words, really. Bloody hell, I said again, only this time louder because I was pissed off and it comforted me to say it. And then I declared to nobody listening, I am not brave. I am not a brave person. And I switched on the engine, and I made my way to my local diner.
Just the one?
Yes, thank you.
You're so very welcome.
I love that this waitress, who's been serving me for well over 10 years, but whose name I don't know because I'm quite sure her name tag, which reads Pete, is a false identity, stubbornly clings to mid-century decorum. I mean, I'm not just welcome, which really is kind of pedestrian. I am so very welcome. Which implies that by walking through those doors, I have bestowed on her in the establishment an honour. And coming from anybody else, it might sound insincere, but with, let's say, Pete, for lack of a better name, she perfectly straddles that line between condescension and practiced refrain with the grace of a circus tightrope walker. 2 eggs, scrambled, bacon, no toast.
No toast?
No. Bacon?
Okay. Newspaper.
Thank you.
You're so very welcome.
This diner is my favourite place to hide. The seats have expired over decades to a Pepto-Bismol peach, not pink. And the etching on the glass booth separators looks exactly like 1950s Libby's stemware. And there's Pete, of course, who's been serving me forever but refuses to admit that she recognises me. And the regulars who treat this diner not like their home, but like a monthly visit to Aunt Betty's 2-bedroom ranch. A little overly familiar to cover up the awkward, pervasive loneliness. There's the woman with the toddler who keeps announcing their child's breakfast progress as though it's an accomplishment that reflects well on her. There's the guy who only ever orders a coffee but clearly doesn't feel complete without his lit cigarette as breakfast companion. Screw the smoking ban! He doesn't say, but wants to. And then there's the 2 ladies who meet for their weekly breakfast diner outing, just happy to be away from home and in each other's company. Yes, hello? What? When? Okay, I'm coming now. which you think changes everything, but really just exposes the fundamentally unalterable path that you are on.
I don't understand why you waited this long.
No, I wasn't.
It's very unlikely she will regain consciousness. You should be prepared. I'm on call, and the nurse will pay me if there is any change.
And then she was gone. I don't blame her for her desire to escape. What's she going to say? You're going to sit here, waiting while your mother dies, replaying all those missed opportunities to connect. I'd run too. I went to her room to be sure she was asleep, to listen to her breathe and touch a hand to her hair. And then I followed her coward's path down the hall in search of coffee. Wending my way down the airless and identical corridors in search of coffee, I eventually found a watery too-hot cup of coffee and went to the emergency room to not drink it. There was an old man, alone, on a gurney, scrunched up against the wall, waving his IV hand in the air. He was waving, like, well, the Queen, to nobody in particular, but as a gesture to indicate his presence and approval of the proceedings. I mean, or so I imagined. As a child, I often made up scenarios for everybody I met, invented meanings for random details. Who in the room left their Christmas lights on all year round? Who kept a flask tucked in their jacket pocket in case of emergencies? Who felt God should have made better choices? I like this man. I liked him for his commitment to the wave, for his audacity in the face of illness, and for his refusal to acquiesce to being shoved up against the wall. And as I was enjoying this moment of intimate observation of a stranger, I realised he was not in fact waving, but calling for help. I looked around the room, everybody else caught up in their own personal chaos, and I knew it was up to me to respond. But as I stood to walk over to his gurney, I saw that he'd stopped waving. Edging in slow motion up to him on the gurney, I placed my coffee cup on his sheets. And I realised he'd died. Died while I watched. And at that precise moment, I heard my name paged over the loudspeaker, and I realised